tutti si vetri, caira batu suere matre spura, tacerenti, kutu. Pirika tutte rispagliano gente, su cui amatosci, tapacutro spiratu, ocura. Kutira masundara ieri sira, tapacutro spagnato, te tutto. Welcome, everyone, and this is going to be our final roundtable, which is just with myself, Vox Angeles, and Andena Sananda Kumara, and we have just been kind of interviewing each other. I know that some of you know a bit about us just because of the summit itself, but we thought it would just be really wonderful to allow people to get to know us a little deeper, and I think as well to allow us to get to know each other a little deeper by being able to talk in this type of situation. So, welcome, Andona, and I'm really excited to kind of learn even more about your beautiful work and so forth. And welcome. Yeah,
Yeah.
welcome. We've been here many times now, and now it's just us. So I guess let's just begin by why don't you tell me, or tell our audience, like, how did this all begin for you?
Well, okay. So it's been a progressive journey, and that's what I call it. I call my journey a progressive awakening because I've always had the intuitive side of myself. I've always been connected with the unseen realms, although I didn't have that validated growing up as a child. I didn't have anybody I could go to because for my parents, it was very much a taboo subject. So it was like, we're not even going there. We're not even going there. And so I would see deceased relatives, whether in dreams or in waking life, I would see them as shadows and things like that, and I would wake up and see things. But the way this light language journey kind of began for me was catalyzed given my relationship within marriage. I always say marriage is such a great classroom because I've always been inclined to the spiritual side of myself, but I've always done the things that I was supposed to do based on society and parents and all those things. I've always lived my life in that way. Although I might have had an inclination to go a different route, I would always let someone talk me back into staying in the pattern, staying in the loop. I always wanted to teach. I had a desire to teach at a very early age, but I let my mother talk me back into working in the corporate world. So I worked almost 20 years as a software engineer. That's where my background lies. So what catalyzed my stepping into light language was my marital relationship. I got to a point where it wasn't working out the way that I had planned, and it was a lot of me in the process. Although I didn't see it that way, it was a lot of blame that I put on the other side. And my husband and I have always had a great relationship. We've always been a great team. He's a very gentle soul. But I had gotten to a point where I was so angry with him, which I had never been so angry with him, that I had to sit him down and have a conversation. And as we were having this conversation, something clicked. And I was having a conversation with him and also having a conversation with myself at the same time. And by this time, I was very I had gotten really into the spiritual realm, watching Gaia and things like that. So I knew how this thing worked, how life was a mirror and all of that. But as I was having this conversation with him, and I pivoted and having this simultaneous conversation with myself, I started to tell myself all these things. Life is a mirror. What is it showing you about yourself? And where do you see you? Ultimately, out of all of that, I realized that I was holding him to a standard that he could never live up to. It was my definition of what I thought he should be. And when I turned that reflection in on myself, I wasn't being myself. I wasn't allowing me to walk in my truth. And so that anger instantly dissolved. I immediately stopped talking to him and turned it on myself. And really, at that point was when I decided it was time to step into my truth. And so I connected with a group to the celebration of my guides. It was like, in this lifetime. So I turn to the side all the time. It's because my guides are speaking to me as I'm speaking to you, and they're giving me, they're kind of chiming in as I speak. But as I was as I made that realization and I connected with the group, it was like a celebration that I could feel and I could just about hear audibly. It was like, in this lifetime, we finally got her over the hump. She finally decided to stand in her truth and make the effort to move toward that end and connecting with the group. So I connected with the group. And in that group, she would bring in teachers from time to time. And she brought in a lady she went by the name Sage Oneness. And I had only ever seen her on YouTube, but she came in and spoke to the group. And after her speaking to our group, well, about 2 weeks after that, she reached out to me and said that her guides, which were three beings, these extraterrestrial beings who would show up to her from time to time, they showed up to her and said to reach out to me for an activation. And then at this point, I had no clue what an activation was or any of that. I had kind of heard of light language, but I didn't know what an activation was. And so when she spoke it, I always ask my guidance. I would always ask them, and I was by this time well attuned to hearing that voice. And the voice said, "You don't have to understand it; just say yes." Right? And by this time, I trusted them to such a degree that I never questioned what they told me. So I just always surrendered, and so I did. And she took me through 4 sessions. And the very first session, I had no idea what to expect. But in these sessions, she would have me draw these codes over my first eye. And so we went through, I think it was about 26 different codes that I would draw over my first eye. And after the very first one that night, she said, just relax and allow everything to settle. Don't try to do anything. Well, of course, things started to happen. And she said, well, just reach out when you're ready for the next session. So I kind of drove the scheduling of all the sessions based on my guidance. After that very first one, I received a download of codes, and I had never drawn codes before. By this time, I was very well settled into automatic writing. And so I automatic wrote these codes to myself. And so in drawing these codes to myself, I was like, well, that's interesting. Didn't look like anybody's that I had seen, anything that I had ever seen. But I was inclined for whatever reason to ask, what does this mean? And so for every code that I received, I started to get a message to accompany each code. So it was almost like my higher self was speaking to me. And it was giving me like blueprints of what I had established before coming into incarnation, what I had set up to do, what I wanted to live, different themes to play out in my experience. Over the next 3 sessions with her, digging deeper into the meaning and sounds that accompany each code, I started to open up even more. And I ended up downloading, I think the next download was like 66 different codes. And each of those was a message, another detailed message going deeper and deeper to myself. It was like another message from me to me, unpacking me, helping me understand more about me. So at the conclusion of that, which we ended up doing on like the spring equinox, we went through the last activation, and from then on it was like I was set. I was moved out into drawing these codes. Well, they say as the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and this is how people would show up. I never reached out. I've never reached out to anyone. These people just magically show up in my experience to walk me into the next up leveling of myself. And so I had a lady reach out to me based on a post, because kind of I would kind of troll some of the Facebook groups to practice my psychic skills. So when people would ask questions, I'd say, okay, do we have a message, to give to that person? And I would kind of practice my ability to hone in on something based on what I would come across. So somebody posted something about scars, carrying in scars from other lives and different things. And I had a response for her, and it resonated so much with one lady who read the responses that she reached out to me like right away. And so when she reached out, for whatever reason, it was like schedule a meeting with her. You guys need to have a conversation. So the next, she reached out to me on a Friday, Saturday morning, we were having a conversation. So we got online, and speaking to her, it was like speaking to somebody I had known my whole entire life. And so we got very well connected. And from then on, we talked almost every day, every night. And all she would do is share with me her experiences. And so at some point down the line, she started to mention light language to me, asking me if I spoke light language, and if I was familiar with doing it, and did I know that I could do it, and all these things. And I was like, well, no, 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 that's not a thing. I can do this. I can draw, automatic write, but I've never spoken anything like that. And so one night I'm on the phone with her, and she's just sharing with me one of her stories like she would normally do. And she gets really quiet, and it's like really weird all of a sudden. Like she gets really quiet, and she's not saying anything. And I'm sitting on the phone waiting for her to speak. And I'm saying, hello, hello. And she's not saying anything. All of a sudden, it's as if somebody pours warm honey over the top of my head, and it just wraps around my entire body. And I'm just in this bliss state on the phone. And I think to myself, what did you do? What did you do to me? Like I instantly wanted to blame her. What did you do? And she's like, she comes back and she says, well, I didn't do anything. My guides said that there was something here for you and for me to just hold a space. She held that space. And the next day, I'm in my copper pyramid, because I would record myself moving energy, silently moving energy. I would record myself doing that in the copper pyramid. So I set up the next night to do that. And as I'm sitting in the copper pyramid preparing to move energy, my guides say the syllable ha. And I'm like, what? They're like, say the syllable ha. And I said, okay, ha. No, they said, no, get in your heart space, settle in, and say the syllable ha. And so I started saying ha. And ha was a syllable that tied back to that very first activation I had received from my friend, Sage Oneness. It was connected to a symbol that was tied to the heart. So I was familiar with the syllable, the sound ha. And so they said, get in your heart and say the syllable ha. So I start saying it. And as I'm saying it, it gets faster and faster and faster and faster. So I'm saying ha, ha, ha. It's almost like I'm starting to laugh, just saying ha, ha, ha. But as I'm saying ha, this energy is building from down deep, like way down deep. And it is building, and I can just feel it intensifying as it rises. It's almost like that sensation of having a gas bubble rise up through you, but it's just rising and rising and rising. And by the time it hits my throat, it feels like I'm going to purge, I'm going to throw up. It's that kind of sensation. Well, it's just sound coming out of my mouth. at that point, just sound just flowing out of my mouth like water. And I'm sitting in the back of myself. It's like but I instantly become an observer and I'm watching my mouth move and deliver all of this sound. So this is how it settled in for me and officially started. And the rest is evolved exponentially since then. Yeah.
Wow, what an amazing story and process. I am curious at where did you or how did you develop such a high um, sense of trust for everything that was happening and just being in a space where you're actually allowing all of this to happen and just trusting the process. How was that instilled?
By fire, right? Okay, so here is how this goes. I would have so many things happen throughout my life. It in hindsight, the way I see it now, it was almost as if the announcement was trust or die. Trust or die, trust or exit. So when I was a kid, I tell this story all the time, but I had a snake show up in my backyard. I went to feed my dog, and by this time my parents were divorced, so I spent a lot of time alone. And so I went outside to give my dog some water. It's very hot in Mississippi heat. And I reached down to turn the spigot, and the water bowl was just underneath the spigot. So as I reached down to turn the spigot on to put water in the bowl, I look and there's a snake coiled back, ready to strike, just like this. And all I see is teeth, ready to strike. And so in that moment, my guides say, don't run, just turn and walk away. It was like everything froze. It was like this sparkly haze, everything froze. And my guide said, don't run, just turn and walk away. Right. And I turn and walk away and I come back in the house. Now I should have been bitten because it was in like an inch of my hand. Should have been bitten, but I wasn't. So I listened to the voice. Right. Growing up, get to the point where I'm living with my mom and I'm headed out. I had an internship. I was in graduate school at this time. It was the first day of the internship. So I'm dressed to the nine with my heels on, headed down the stairs. And I get to the top of the landing, and we have hardwood floors in the house, about 20 steps to the top, and no rails anywhere. And my boot heel gets caught in the hem of my pants. And I think in that moment, what can I do to help myself? That's the thought I have within a millisecond. What can I do to help myself? And that voice says, just reach out. And I didn't even question it. I didn't even question the rationality of it. I didn't even question any of that. The voice just said, reach out. And I reached out like Superman. I just surrendered and everything went black. And I was placed on my bottom at the bottom of the stairs, looking back up. That was the next moment. So I trusted. If I hadn't trusted, I don't know, I could have fallen and plummeted to my death or been hurt really, really bad. But that was one incident. The next incident, I had these reoccurring dreams about tornadoes. And by this time, I'm dating my husband, my now husband. We were dating at the time. And my brother had dropped me off at his apartment. And as we were sitting there, the weather started to get really, really bad. And we're flipping back between network TV and then something else on another channel. And so in one of those instances of flipping back to network TV, this blue screen comes on. And the guy basically says, the announcer says, if you can see this screen, you need to take cover now. There's a tornado on the ground. And if you are in a view of this screen, you need to take cover right now. And so I grabbed my stuff and I walked to he had these balcony patio doors. And as I look out that window across to see the sky, for whatever reason, all I could see in my mind's eye was that tornado coming right for us. Right for us. So my guide said, I heard that voice because at this time, I didn't even know about guides. I just knew about a voice, right? I just knew about a voice. And so the voice says, you need to go right now. Grab your stuff and go now. So I'm at the door. I have my things and I'm at the door and I'm telling him, we have to go now. We have to go now. So I'm trying to wait for him, but he's taking his time because, it would always storm in the Midwest. That wasn't a foreign thing, and we would always get warnings, but, never anything very serious. But he was taking his time, and my guys, that voice said, you're going to have to leave him. You have to go now. And so I headed down the stairs, ran down the stairs, and by the time I get as far down to the basement, I can hear him running behind me coming down. No sooner than we get into the little washroom in the basement and sit down, the walls start to shake and you can feel this sucking of air, like you can't catch your breath because everything has been sucked up like a vacuum where the tornado passed, just like that. And so when we come up out of that room, and about just a couple of seconds after that, come out of that room, everything above us is gone. He lived on the third floor. It was a 3-story apartment building. He was on the very top floor. Everything above us, when we came out of that apartment, that little room, and looked up, we saw nothing but the clear, starry night sky. That's all that was left. And so if we had stayed, we wouldn't be here. So it was like that. It was like trust by fire. The voice will always speak. And there are a number of other things haven't even mentioned, but it was like I got to a point through these experiences. It's like it trust becomes an unquestioned thing. You just trust it because you know your life and that somebody is guiding you. You know that someone is there. You are not in this thing alone and you're being kept here for a reason. So that was the point that I got to through all of those experiences.
Wow, I hadn't heard those stories, and I want to say
Yeah.
it's so interesting because someone had asked me that question myself, and it's pretty much the same thing where, and I had a staircase. I was in grad school, and I was at the top, and I took a step, and the step wasn't there, and there was a flash of blue light, and I just remember my next step was like 2 stories down, and I just turned around and I looked, and I was like, I just went, and I looked, and I don't know what happened in between. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was like the same. And I had situations like that too. And, I would tell those stories when people said, how can you just indiscriminately like trust? Because, a lot of people just they don't have a context. They don't know how, they don't know, they can't trust certain things, because they just don't have that
Yeah.
context. But it's so interesting to see the similarities and those stories. And so that was why I have, things like that happen in my, growing up and so forth as well. And very similar circumstances, not a tornado, but very similar
Yeah.
circumstances. But that's what honed my trust and knowing there are those on the other sides that have my best interests at heart. I'm supposed to be here, and so I've learned, when you hear that voice, you just follow that voice, even in fear. Many times in my life, I would just move in fear. I would do
Yeah.
things in fear because I would just simply trust the voice that was telling me to do certain things. So
Yeah.
I love hearing those stories. And when those things,
Yeah.
just for a lot of people, I wonder how many people actually have circumstances like that and they don't realize that a miracle just happened, that they don't even
Right.
catch that, they don't catch that something someone on the other side has just maybe saved their lives or just done something to cause them to change direction so that they missed a mishap or whatever it might be. i
Right.
would I would venture to bet that there's a lot of things that happen in people's lives where they just really kind of miss
Yeah. I would
um,
say that too. I think it's paramount to learn to trust that voice. But what I will say is that it's progressive too, because
mhm.
as I learned to trust and the voice would continue to speak in the other incidences that happened after that, the voice became more and more elaborate, more and more extensive. Like the messages became more and more detailed and involved, kind of preparing me for what was about to come. So it wasn't just in the moment I'm calling out and there is the voice. It got to a point where it's setting the stage for something I'm about to walk into months later. Like I'm getting it well in advance. I started to get it well in advance too. Yeah.
It's almost like a prophetic and kind of thing. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
we've been here and done this before, type of
Yeah.
thing. I always have a
Yeah.
sense that maybe like a past version of ourselves is actually here
Yeah.
drawing us through this lifetime. Okay, you did all this
Yeah.
before, so now let's like move on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh no, that is so beautiful. So now when you're talking about your light language, how do you define light language? And in this sense of how it is that it came through you, how it is that you utilize it, because I know you make the beautiful songs or the symbols and so forth.
Yeah.
Where do you believe that these communications are actually stemming from?
So at this point, having evolved to such a degree, now I know that it's coming from source. In the very beginning, I didn't have a very good bead on where it was coming from. I would get names from time to time, and based on my upbringing, and because I had grown up in the church, I had different, I had mixed emotions associated with some of the names that they would bring forward as sources, right? And so I got to a point where I realized that knowing the names was creating a hindrance for me in receiving or connecting to different spaces. And so I got to a point where I said, I don't even need a name. What I'm going to do, and this is what I told my guides, right? I didn't even know what I was doing at that point, but I really opened myself up is what I did. But I said, I don't even need to know names. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to get in my heart and feel because I seem to be able to feel into different spaces so well that I can really feel the energy of a thing. And so just let me feel the energy. That's all I need. I don't need to know a name. I don't even need to know a source. I just need to feel. And so that's kind of how it progressed. In hindsight, I realized I took the bounds off because I opened myself up to anything and everything that's aligned from the space of the heart. And I've been able to move myself forward in that way. And I've had different people show up, different reflections of myself show up to kind of confirm that that's all you need. You don't need protection. People talk about protection and being afraid to open themselves up to the unseen realms, or really, you don't need any of that. Sit in the space of the heart, and you are guided, protected, all of those things that you could ever ask for just by virtue of being present within that heart space, moving from that heart space. So yeah.
I love to hear that from the mouth of someone else. Because I was always taught, I was always guided that no, you don't need the protective measures. You need to
Right.
drop the protective measures and just be radiant, radiate your
Yeah.
light, and do what it is that you do. That is your protect, and then protection. And then they always equated that back to the life of Jesus of Nazareth or Yeshua, whoever.
Mm.
Um, you said an interesting thing, and I thought, wow, because that's something I'd learned that a lot of people probably don't think about. But back when you're like, oh, the names that I'm receiving are kind of, there's a little friction there based upon your
Hmm.
background and so forth. So I thought that was actually an interesting statement and just saying, I don't need the names. I just, I would just like to feel. And it's really interesting because I'm always talking about things just become a distraction. So a name becomes a distraction. And when you talk about how people say, "Well, I channel," or I this message that's coming through is from Archangel Michael here, and
Mm.
I've channeled Archangel Michael all of my life, and I was like, "Well, what about the rest of it?" To me, that's
Yeah.
like a box that you're putting
Yeah.
yourself in a box. And so it's a distraction almost because I think that it's limiting to really focus upon specific beings, specific entities, whatever, specific names, and so forth that have such a dramatic context and a meaning or that you
Mm.
can define because it kind of
Mm.
takes you out of that flow. So I
Yeah.
loved that you were saying that. It's like I don't need a name. And
Yeah.
a lot of times names would come in, or I would recognize angels, and at first they would look like an angel a biblical angel.
Yeah.
Um, but at a certain point that you begin to trust, you don't need all that. I
Hmm.
recognize their frequency. I recognize them, and so that's the evolution of our relationship, or our way of communicating with spirit.
Yeah, sometimes in the very beginning, I thought there was something wrong with me, though. I thought I was doing it wrong because I wasn't because I wasn't aligning like a lot of people that I had seen up to that point were all connected to one group. They identified with being a channel with one group. I'm like, well, it doesn't work like it's not working like that for me. What am I doing? Does that eventually come? Do you eventually get associated with a specific group? But as I evolve now, at this point, I realize there's nothing wrong with me. You just an open conduit for all that is, an open conduit for all that is source. So you don't have to align with a specific group. There may be a contract in place where you agree to maybe bring through messages for that group in a sense, right? That could be that. But for me, it's never been that. I've been open to all that desires to flow through. As long as it's in resonance with the heart space, then I'm on the line, right? Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about how do you utilize light language in how do you utilize light language not only for self but for others, like in-person things, group things. How does that process flow for you?
Well, it can flow in many different ways. I'm trying to say, how do we want to answer that? Uh, mm, so sometimes we do meditations, we do group meditations. So I lead group meditations. So I would guide a particular group. I've done two cohorts is what I kind of call them because it's an extensive 12-week thing, 12-week, yeah, 12-week thing. But we would go through and I would guide a meditation into that space. So open it up with some spoken word and then lead us through visualizations. Now, I don't have a cookie cutter method for how I use my light language with a group. It's different every time, even when working with groups, it's just kind of different every time. So in a summarized way, this is how I can say I work with those groups. I get in the heart space and open up. And it's like my team goes in collaboration with the team of those all present, right? And then I serve as the mouthpiece for what needs to come through for that group or that individual. That's kind of in a nutshell how it works for me. How that looks, that out picturing is different from person to person, but I just kind of surrender myself in that way. I can hear, feel, perceive, and I just allow the impressions to come and I just yield to the impressions that come and work with a person in that way. Yeah.
Well, and that with, you're working with people in person and in groups and so forth. How has your light language and the spiritual work that you're doing as a whole really transformed your own life? And do you use it on a daily basis for self?
Yes. Okay. So this is kind of something I walked into in a really in a way that I wasn't really trying to. The way I'll say this is a lot of times you come into these different awarenesses, and when you're new in the scene, at least for myself, my first inclination was I'm here to serve the world. I need to save the world. There's something I bring that's going to save everybody else, right? So I left my job and I was under the mindset that I'm going to start creating these light language transmissions, activations, and people are going to come to my classes and be changed. And I'm saving, woohoo, right? That was the mindset. So I did that, and I spent weeks and weeks developing these transmissions, and I would get up every day and record these transmissions to put out on YouTube and share with the world. This first series was maybe a collection of maybe 26, 27 transmissions, and I would create a video for each one. It wasn't until about the 24th recording that I realized what was happening. What was happening is that I was changing. I was evolving because I would sit and listen to each transmission at least 10 times to make sure the sound was right, to make sure I could feel, like really feel it, like, because before I would share it with anybody, I had to feel it first, right? That was my mindset. I had to feel it first. But I never realized until the 24th one, and I had to laugh at myself that it took that long for me to realize that, oh my God, I'm activating myself. I am catalyzing myself because by the 24th one, I had gotten to a place where I was hearing and perceiving so well. I'm like, what the heck is happening? And then my guys kind of chimed in and they were like, well, you are activating. Look at all the activations you have been through. You are activating yourself. And so that was a great lesson for me because I realized how this thing really works. And it's like it's coming through you as you change. So does the world change, right? The world outside of you changes as you change, but you have to feel it first. You are inclined to feel it first. You can't, there's a saying that you can't feel from an empty bucket. You can't feel anyone from an empty bucket. So you really have to focus on you first. So I utilize my light language in that way. Anything that is produced now and shared on my YouTube channel or anywhere else, it's impacted home first before it gets out the gate. If I don't feel it, it's not going anywhere because it's not at the vibe. I'm not at the vibe to feel that it's too low, right? If I feel it though, it's getting out the gate. That's my barometer for what I share. It's impacting home first. So I use it in that way. In everything that I produce, I'm feeling into that. And that's why it's shared. Otherwise, it won't be shared. But in the day-to-day mundane things, I'm using it all the time. Like it'll spontaneously come up all the time. My kids will tell you I try to use it on them, like to, to help to help them deal with different things. They call it mommy speaking the angel language, or they call it the dragon language, depending on, the tone and tenor of how it's coming out. But yeah, I use it all of the time. I use it to commune with nature. So I go outside and I've really gotten, since relocating to Florida, I've really got more and more connected with being in nature and communing with the trees, with the water, with the ground, everything. I spend time out in nature. And so I will use my light language in that way. And sometimes I just radiate and allow myself to feel the frequency. I will commune with the sky. And so I will go out and do Qigong in the morning time or at some point during the day. It's me getting my daily dose of sunshine. So me and the sun have a one-on-one and just allowing myself to move the energy and feel frequency in that way. So I'm utilizing it all of the time for everything. Yeah.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I can actually see and feel that as you're talking about, just going out and kind of honoring the sun. And it's I know we've talked about this a little bit. It's really like a technology. And I
Yeah.
think when you talk about it at light language as being a technology, that's flowing through everything that you're saying, the progression of your work and everything that you do with clients and what have you, and with yourself. And it's really showing that there is an activation, there is an initiation, there is a transformation
Mm,
that's taking place.
mm,
And you said something different. So you were like, if it doesn't activate me, then it's not going out there. And it was kind of a curious thing because I've had circumstances where I've done a transmission and I'm like, meh, I don't know. And they're like, well, it's not for you. It's not for
Interesting.
specific, it's not a specific purpose. Like if I'm working with a private client or something, it's for them, it's prescriptive to them. So it may not have anything to do with me, so that there may not be any. Sometimes there's similarities where when you're doing a transmission, you might feel, oh, there's something about the heart because I can kind of feel that within myself. But there have been times when the frequencies it didn't resonate with me because it wasn't mine.
Mm, okay.
Whereas the client or whatever is like, oh my goodness, oh, you just don't know. And I was just kind of like, I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay.
but it's kind of interesting because there's that part of it. There's that part
Mm,
of it too.
hmm.
Um, So it just may not, if you've gone and ever heard other people speak light language or other people do energy work or things like that, sometimes I feel it and I feel a response,
Hmm.
and sometimes I don't, where other people around me are having all of these experiences. So I find it really interesting because I think there's also a component that sometimes, if you're doing like a group transmission,
Hmm.
that it's about listening and feeling, and some people are gonna hear and feel or sense something totally different from another person. And I could sit over
Mm.
there saying, no, I didn't have that experience, but someone over
Mm.
here had a huge experience with that. And so I just find that I find it kind of interesting because I think both is true.
Maybe, I think maybe that speaks to the degree to which that resonance might exist. Because from my perspective, the way that I see it is that anything that's in your experience is resonant with you on some level to some degree. So it may not be felt so closely because it may not be so close to home. It's kind of like that picture of having energetic blocks that exist within the body versus energetic blocks that exist out in your field, right? That
Yeah.
exists out in the field. So it could be something to that effect as well. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. And I would
Yeah.
imagine as things flow through it, that there has to be something happening. Obviously, it's not that I can
Right.
feel it, but
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just not having like this glorious experience
It's
with it that somebody
right.
receiving it might be having. And when I
Right.
look at it that way, I'm like, well, I don't need that, but they
Yeah.
do. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of more of what I'm trying to say. So how has your family acclimated to all of this? I mean, what was your kids and your husband, is there like watching you evolve and go through all of this? What was their response to it?
So, so my kids always knew. I never shielded any of this from my children. And I've always been very open with them because I never had that validation as a kid. I was very intent on making sure my children had that validation. So I would always sit and tell them different things and listen to their stories. If they told me they saw something, I would always know. We would always have those conversations. My husband, on the other hand, I never revealed any of this to him. I always tucked it away and hid it because, number one, he wasn't even very spiritual to begin with. He grew up in the church, but he went by force because his mother made him go to the church, but he never connected with that spiritual aspect of himself in that way. So I had this fear that if I divulged that information to him, that he was going to head for the hills and be out the door. And I couldn't take that risk, so I never opened up. But eventually, I got to the point where it was like, okay, you got to step into your truth. It's time to walk it, right? It's time to be it. And so I had to come out of the spiritual closet to him. And I remember sitting and telling him, and I didn't know what to expect, but it was a risk I was willing to take in telling him, and I did. And his eyes glazed over, of course. And he said, well, we'll deal with it. We'll work through it, right? I don't know that he knew what he was getting into when he said that, right? Because he's he stepped into realization of so much in watching me evolve in a public way, right? Like he hears me and the kids talking about all these things, and what's really happened is that now he's at a point where he wants to have some of these mystical experiences. There's a side of him that wants to have that experience, but then there's this other side of him that says, "Nah, I can't have that experience." And on some level, I think that's kind of the agreement or the role that he came to play, because I see me and my kids so well set and established in walking in this truth. He serves as like an anchor point for us as we do those things, those fantastical things, have these fantastical experiences. So my house is very much reflective of the me that I am now. It wasn't in many years past. Light codes exist all over the home and crystals are everywhere. I am fully integrated into our home now, whereas before it was all tucked away in its neat and tidy little corner type of thing. Yeah.
That's beautiful because we've talked about this, and I think across the board of all the people that we've interviewed, everybody seems to have that type of relationship with their partner
Yeah.
or their spouse. And I find that interesting, but pretty much across the board, it's like, well, they're very supportive. And my husband, what I heard was, oh, he's like the Rock of Gibraltar. He's like
Mm,
holds you. He keeps you
yeah.
grounded so that you can fly, so you can do the work. So it's kind of the same thing. And I just think that
Mm,
one of the challenges with trust often is that people are trying to find support, whether it be familial support or community support, so that they too can just open up. They have like-minded souls around them, or at least people that are truly supportive of what it is that's happening within your life. And I think that is really important. So it's beautiful at this day and age that people can now find different groups. The summit here, they can hear all the
mhm.
different stories and so forth. So I think that is really important. So when you're doing this work, how do you feel that the light language is actually affecting people physically, emotionally, spiritually? How is it interacting with the people that hear you and have the experience with you?
Mm. So I feel like, in simple terms, we are souls having a human experience. And I feel like this vessel is really just a tool, right? And so when we can get out of the way and open up in that heart space, do we allow the full radiance that is the divine essence of us to flow through and radiate out into the physical plane? And I think that in itself brings others into resonance. So it's like almost like a tuning fork that works by virtue of, let's say, quantum entanglement. So things that are resonantly aligned, I think it works in that way, to be quite honest. I feel like the human vessel is an instrument, and you're attuning an instrument. And as that instrument plays, others fall into resonance with that frequency, that sound. So that frequency more so than sound, because I feel like it can come out in a number of ways. But ultimately, at its basis level, it's all divine frequency being allowed to flow through, and it brings that which is like itself back into remembrance of itself, right? Beyond the illusions. That's the way ultimately I think it works in simple terms. I think that's how it works.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like that it's almost like we are both a receiver, but we're
Hmm.
also we're also a beacon or a transmitter of that.
Right.
Yeah, I love that explanation. So I would actually I'd like to receive from you, and I'd love for you to share a bit of what it is that you do with the audience, and then we can talk more about the experience afterwards.
Okay.
And I'm going to go ahead and pin you. There we go. And then just go ahead, and if we need to do anything specific in preparation, you can let us know that as well.
So I'm gonna announce that. Okay, so I this is me planning, but I'm flexible. You have to be flexible these days. So I created a song. This is what my guides call a song, and I just wanted to show it because I don't think very many of our panelists displayed, of the symbology. But I wanted to share this because this is like a 2D depiction of energy or energetic flows. It's like a map almost for energy, right? But it's like a 2D representation. And when you interact with this, it comes up, this consciousness bubble comes up, and it's allowed to work within your field. I was gonna do this, and this one is called the sacred microdose. It's what I called it. And so this will be available in the bonus package. If you purchase the bonus package, you can get this. And if you reach out to me with this symbol, then we can work something out, and I'll give a bit of a discount on a personal activation. But I'm not going to use this today because my guy said let's pivot and just be present in the moment and allow what comes through to come through that best serves this moment. So really, I'm all about the heart. Like literally, in simple terms, I am all about the heart, because I feel like the heart is the portal to all that is. That's been my experience. And so I would invite you to just settle within that space of the heart and float. Envision yourself floating on a cloud. You can float in water, any of those things. Just allow yourself to be in a non-resistant state in the space of the heart. And as you do, I will open up this instrument, this vessel, and allow what comes through to come through, that which serves our highest good in evolution at this time. Waruatia Sundravetu Mayarakain, Durosia, Arand, Heras, Varosia, de Asandrekai, Mirusian Dravecumatia, Sovorum de A, Purisia de Ro de Natu Rokayanda. Mirushi re dande a sorukea marakia sondrekaisian orukea dean soresia merusia de asand cerro de an herosukaida so kere andu an duru de risia tu merca de a so rushe de a foruca de rande a Urushia rakamatu elia tu averukia siendrakatua mera sandreko tu quarushia warushiandea merasut veroshiata kai heras verotea handea Merra su te an I arracabe asio te carri sandraveco Maria tutande asio tracadua arasa irasocai mirucande durreci arracadama o de arracayon de siatramatea son vira tucan de a hurricais mi carocai du sandreat verrocamation preat Beran, Hiras, Maturukan, Disaran, Veratukan, Deam, Forukea, Tumirk, Verdun, Discretan, Beracashon Dravetume, Avaricia, Horukan, Deam, Murushi, Recabetum Yatrakat, Verasun, Deashot, Mirasan, Dirokan, Deam, Borussia rocabeotum de mira caindesa barrasan draveo utandia sotramatiason verasan hirakan de matukan yesoru itatana miracabechon drakait duskamati aracabechon drakat varukait anducaroson herokan dean metar shendravet Verkan, Heros, Varishon Drekait, Mirakakan, O Verokan, Utan, Seruk Matan, Horum Tean, Serandukarean, Horum, Disere Chocania, Mirusotravatua, Verukamatia Sandreat, Vorukatan, Herutaan, Seruk mean, dean, varushandrevet, deau tu revadunia, dia regvedunia, automatica ita copari tanda so reva ua, mi wodurakan, herukaan, seruk vean, turun, Urisia rakatumat, dirgama utindat, siarkava ud, drik atana, arak utana, merugia tukane fod, desarrokava utunia tramatea, rak iat, dukarke veon, serrason, hiras. Atan mirak aba u ak etetutun de kama ating atu kapa u ke ta kabaroko kuti tama u kamba ashinda karoko u tenda o kombe a ia nuro komo de atina atu kapa o te atina takai deskara o de rakai rakama u tanda tu merakai siam Bo urik idiskirkadam utan derasan verukayan numerukain dean farun farukaya sorukain dean verandukai reon sierra kama utendea shotramatia verushan dea Porushi rakame ote an sirukan dea perun dea porushi rakame ut varushan varushan varian isham hashi rasuan dea verun dea varam isham varian. Yes, sir. We are complete. Varasande. Yes, we are complete. You're on mute. You're still muted.
Oh, thank you. I I can't speak it. It was funny. There was that thing like, okay, I'm interviewing, and so I can't allow myself to go too deep because I'm going to have to come back and I'm going to have to speak. But then all of a sudden, it was like in a void.
Nice.
And then I went, and then I'm going into sinking into this void, going, okay, but I'm interviewing. It's something's happening. I have no idea. Um, oh, that was beautiful. I can't I can't even. It was the same thing you were saying. It's hard to. I feel, but it's like really hard to express that to
Yeah.
express it. And words. There was a lot of joy because I opened my eyes at
Yeah.
one point before I went into the void, and you were like singing, and you had this big
Yeah.
smile, and you were like, and it was really funny, and I just thought there's this joy. It's bringing joy into my life, and I don't know if it was there was a shifting clear. It was kind of like all of a sudden, boom, and now I'm in this black space. There's like nothing there. I'm just in this void space, and I'm listening to you. And I was trying to think of like a question, something. I was trying to think of something, and all my thoughts just dispersed, and there was just nothing there. It was just your voice in this black space
It's
of
nice.
listening.
This is funny because that's typically what I do when I'm doing a guided meditation. I invite people to sit within the space of the void. Eventually, we get to the void where it's just nothing. You're just allowing yourself to be and listening to the void. So it's interesting that you found yourself in the void. We didn't even take
Well,
you there
and I,
directly.
but then I couldn't connect with anything either. Yeah, I had a question. There were words.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, you're not supposed
Something
to
was
connect with
happening.
anything, right?
Oh, that was beautiful.
Nice.
Beautiful. Thank you. So what are you experiencing when this is happening? I know sometimes people can experience like maybe a masculine or a feminine presence or something kind of that is flowing through you. What are you experiencing yourself when you are doing these transmissions?
In this case, I didn't have a clue. I just felt joy. So I was sitting back as the observer in a joy state, right? In the very beginning, I would always try to stay present because I wanted to assess, because I wanted to be able to tell a person what was happening so they would kind of have an understanding, right? But as this is going along, I've realized that's not necessary. What's intended to be shared will be brought forth if it's necessary to be shared. So I get out of the way as much as I can. I allow myself to sit back, and sometimes I'll have to settle my logical mind and say, just sit back and relax and receive. Sit back, relax, and receive. Get out of the way. You don't need to be present because what is happening is what's being summoned forth, what's necessary for the moment. So I just kind of sit back and allow myself to sit in that heart space and allow.
I think that things are actually they become much more powerful when you allow yourself to just um, sit back and relax, and there's a simplicity to it because there's no need to know and there's no need to complicate it because you already have this intelligent force that's
Hmm.
flowing through that already knows where it's headed and what it's going to be doing and so forth. So I think that anything that we began from our little piddly minds that we began to try to interject in the situation,
Yeah.
that it creates friction.
Yeah.
It's just like yeah. Um, it's almost like what comes to mind is like the envisioning like a bubbling brook, and you if it's smooth and it's smooth bottom, then the water's flowing smoothly. But if you're
Mm.
introducing like these stones and pebbles, like then it starts to bubble and swirl and try to find its way through. And I think a lot of times that's what's happening in certain situations where when people can't step out of their way and just allow and trust, there's a trust thing again, and allow it to flow
Yeah.
through, then you're dispersing boulders into
Yeah.
the stream.
Yeah.
So source consciousness, whatever, is trying to come through, and it keeps trying to find a way past everything the human mind wants to place, put in its place. So
Yeah, and even if you, because in the very beginning, I would always try to say, well, what's the name of this activation, or what's the name for this thing? And I feel like even putting a name on it creates a fence, a boundary around it, because some people aren't savvy enough to allow the mind to float beyond what the established intention was for this particular activation. So if I say this is based on a heart opening, well, it can't meet you beyond that if you've already settled in what it must be for you. So I really try to label as few things as possible. And even when I use a label, I try to leave that label as open as I possibly as I possibly can. Yeah.
yeah, and I totally understand that was one of the messages that I've gotten within this last year. It's the same thing that when, it's like the human language versus the light language, right?
Right.
Your human language is very pinpointed, it's defined. And
Hmm.
I think that when you have a title, then yeah, you put it in a box. It's going to be this, right? This is going to be a
Hmm.
heart opening. There's no space for it to be anything else because you've already declared that that's
Right.
what it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I just love how it's being simplified, but there's just so much freedom available to people to just express in the way that they truly are and allow to do the work as it's coming
Hmm.
through
Yeah.
without all of that.
Yeah.
Without all of that, yeah. But I know that a lot of times when people are listening, they're like, "What are you saying?"
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even answer that question. I was like, what do you feel? What do you feel?
Yeah,
Let's
I
focus
like
on
that.
that,
Well,
right?
you turn it around.
Yeah.
How does it
What
make
do
you
you
feel?
feel? Right. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
I love that. I have to remember to do that more. I mean, there are some cases where that I will speak light language and then I'll speak English.
Hmm.
So often there is a message that's being imparted, but then it's being backed up, or yeah, I guess backed up by light language. So there's
Yeah.
that energetic flow from source that comes through whatever words are being spoken. If people need to hear something, if
Yeah.
they need to receive if they need to receive that message. God, I can't talk. I'm repeating myself. Um,
Yeah. My guys in the very beginning, because my mom my mom hasn't been able to get on board with the light language. And so she asked she was asked if I was ever going to speak English again, right? And so when she asked that question, I was like, well, I don't know, really this is kind of what we do. But I asked my guys that question if we were going to become a channel that channels like, say, Esther Hicks, like Esther Hicks is speaking English. She isn't speaking light language. Like, why do we operate in this way? Well, this is what you're here to do, right? And I had a lady who gave me a spirit guide drawing. And she said, I couldn't get very much from your guides. I said, really? She said, yeah, they don't speak English. They just speak like light language. This is how they come through for everybody. So it's it's not just me. It's not just me. It's for everybody in connection with me. When I'm receiving something, I'm not receiving it in English typically from anybody. It's coming to me in this way so that it can be unpacked and integrated in a way that bypasses this logical mind. And for some on some level, I know that that's so that I can integrate and merge it within me. Because what I've noticed is people talk a lot about, like, I'm channeling the Pleiadians, or I'm channeling this energy, and I'm channeling the Arcturians, and all of these things. Well, really, for me, from my perspective, I feel like this vessel, we are incarnated to balance all of those energies, to reconcile all of those energies into one point of focus. That's the challenge. That's the job. That's the nature of the game. Is from my perspective, is how I perceive it. So I'm not here to maintain just that dragon stream, just to channel the dragon dialect. I'm here to merge it with all that is me, such that it becomes one unified, whole, and complete thing. So I learned that very on, and I'm going to tell you this story. I had a friend, the same friend who was holding space when that energy wrapped itself around me. She mentioned about the need to balance the Lyran and the dragon energy. And I didn't understand that at the time, but I knew that there was something to what she mentioned. So I sat in my copper pyramid and I went down the rabbit hole asking my guides questions if there was an imbalance within myself with those two energies. And come down to it after like tons and tons of questioning going down the rabbit hole, we get to a point that, yes, I just needed to see it for myself. I needed to be able to see it for myself and acknowledge it. And how we balanced that was I pictured, I would envision, because visualization creates, right? A thought creates, right? I feel like all of that can bring you to a place of balance as you acknowledge it. But I would envision this dragon stream of energy, like a smoke rising up as I spoke, and this Lyran energy rising up as a smoke. And I would see those coming together and joining. And then I would speak. And when I finally got that in balance, I sung for like 45 minutes straight. I could not control it. Every time I opened my mouth, I was singing. So I feel like the point of all of these energies flowing through is to bring them into a state of unified wholeness at the heart and balance all of it.
Yeah, and I love that because there is a unification and a merging of all those streams of consciousness as one. And
Yeah.
that's very poignant. Do you feel that that has anything to do with the fact that many, I think it does. I'm trying to make this point. So a lot of people that when they listen to light language, they're like, it sounded like you were speaking Tibetan. It sounded like you were speaking French. It sounded like you were speaking Spanish, type of thing. And I always wonder, it feels like to me sometimes, and I can hear that in my own inflection, it feels to me that sometimes there's almost, depending on what your ancestry is and all of that, that often there's a reflection of all the aspects of who you are that also come through that stream of consciousness. And that
Mm,
sometimes you sound this way or that way. And I'm kind of curious, and I know different voices come in, for me anyway,
yeah.
but they do kind of come together as like this collective voice. But I think
Yeah.
because everything's interconnected, I feel like sometimes it's bringing something up out of me that is my own heritage, that is my own ancestral thing that's adding that gift that's being added, or it kind of added to the mix.
Yeah, I feel like it's the first language, to be quite honest, and I feel like it's the derivative of on which upon which all other languages have been established. So there's a little bit of it being reflected by other language. I don't think it's the other way around. I think light language is the source, the original language, the frequency-based language is the source upon which all other derivatives of language are built. So there's a little bit of all of it in different pieces of language everywhere. So I think it's all of our heritage. It's not necessarily one line,
Yeah,
one lineage, if
I
that
would
if that
have to
makes sense.
agree with that. I
Yeah,
think I really of that belief because if it's coming from source, right?
yeah,
Infinite intelligence, God, whatever you want to call it. that is
Yeah.
all things. So
Hmm.
I think it also depends on who's listening
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they may as well hear something that's more aligned with them. Because I know I've had people
Hmm.
that say, I didn't hear that, but that's cool, whatever. And so I think it just comes down to the fact that people hear what it is that they need to hear,
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
best and as right.
What they have activated the energy streams, because I feel like we have tons of dormant DNA that exists from different galactic groups and all of those things. And I feel like what you've come online brought online is kind of what you resonate with to a certain extent, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well,
Yeah.
why don't we do our little Trinity light language dialogue? I think that'll be good. So I will start and we'll go 3 cycles like we've been doing.
Okay.
See? And we'll see what transpires. All right. I'm going to take a breath for a moment here. Isquira baciana maiere tur. Sakaya papapace tucund respira. Naiere tucur ur. Et spicia shundra spiciaia utur spicia mamma caciere lur. Maciet cura shandretiam. Emboro. It became a mamma che ciore sacciondere spiria. Es tu co ora be makitun ma makitun na trespira sakera dura ba and ha tu cora spiniare tura and ha che sputas chatre petun and ha.
Barco Shadrat, Reco Maitan, the Rakain de Sotrometua, Rosia, Takai, Resian Doramatia, Rahia, Rocade Ute, Andia Sotramatia, the Kai, Rahin, the Kaisia, Rohia to Mirokova Old, Ya de Ratukan, Redan de Atumat, Borum de Asua, the Kain, Cerro. Rita merkadeasiotea, rahiotometun, rekiatu an, rekiatu man, herukayan deam, vorun, resia dea.
I tuoi era pagera tundres, papa che ci tundres, papa eri tur, ma su cura, mamma che ci ora, ma se tur, mamma che ci ora, bucutra spirit andera, hachacha cura, gere manuna, hachacha cura, gere manun, tripiriatura, gepiriatura, bondura, annariere cura, asture me mindu, a picchire menu no truspi chatundre, Endere tura peria, na papapatura, su tu nere puria, e che me mamma che tutule pisciatate, tura, e che momo che ciucciota, sire tendere, kiria tendere, amma hande ure tura, a tu che amma tura, e tura, annere, hondere, e che ture sud, no monde.
Lloro te cain, perro te am, oro te am, de am. Risiam, barasan de ashotea, merokashondra vetu merok, ai siara kadasanu, oru te am, heren de am, varun de am, poru te am. Risiatum merkatan, saraseatum, mirasiatravat, de am, rakhirk meut, rahiatukan, disiark veut, mirasut. Yorutean, serundean, porutean, dean, deo, orum. Me recayendo sotramatia. Era sande asho, retande, barrucan yotramat, recaya tundea siotreat, serra sotea, verrasion, ishon.
Ida pagare tutta respira, mamma che tutto un respire, patacciandere cura, ma per cultura imbestiata tiere tu, ambai cu utru spuia matatiere, e ci chi tundere schi ciappa, e tu le cundere spirita turlen. Matikira kushambora. Makachitu kule botro. Makachera. Atuku ina mama bakachitu and restira. Airo ku ora. Machura bakir shambo truya. Akira mama makachu shore bindrestira. Katutra pere Carebo chokere. Oture pigiere. Katucha patiere.
Yodu Russia, Mira Sandrat, Vera hier Kademute Andakai, Du Sand, Marasand, Vera Sodreat, Vari tu Tund, Mirosot, Rahia Damaud, Rahia Nomati Ashandrakat, Rahia Dokaisia, Murusia, Rakavo Unde Ashotereat, Very Siandravetu Mirk, Vi une itar od. Mira siarak tu mirak du shandreat, rahirak miud, disarrak du mat. Rahian, mirisia tu carrefetun yatramatu ande shandrakatu arvedun yatramatua, ira sutramat, rehiat, du sind mirat, du standere kai itan etur veon, hiras, arasuot. Haris kanu mira kadu an hira kabe oti shiara kadu matia. Rahian do carre fevunde shondre mat. Vo uru shira kade matunde kai discaratandur. Mira sandea. Du carre fo un hira se on herande kai. Darandea. Merakadun derand. Eshant.
E tu ia pa Yesu ko era mama baketche tundra spaghetti tutra spaghetti uture be mayandundra. Let's take a deep breath and just exhale into the space and letting go. And just coming back to your center. Coming back into awareness. It feels like a beautiful closing of an extraordinary experience. And I feel a solidity, like a rooting, but I feel like the beautiful sense of joy that's been woven in just for this, the entire experience of this, what all of
Yeah.
this was. And I feel like this was somewhat of a culmination of that, this
Mhm.
entire journey. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. And
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
that was
Wow.
beautiful. So, what would you, kind of coming at the tail end here, what would you like to share with our audience? What would you like them to take away with them?
Our closing words are typically always the same. Have the courage to be you. Have the courage to be you. Have the courage to live your truth. It won't look like everybody else's. Don't let that sway you in the beginning. The seduction is to follow what's been modeled in the world, but really that's not the path. The real you, the true you, the fullness of you comes in letting that go and moving through the unknown to all that is entailed in the grand journey of discovery of the truth of you. So give yourself permission, have the courage to be you and discover what that is. It takes some isolating from others. It takes isolating in order to get familiar with your own energy, to feel into what that really is, to allow yourself to get acquainted, well acquainted with what it is to be in tune with your own frequency. Give yourself permission to do that. Have the courage to do that. It's a lot of unknowns within that space, but as you have the courage to take little steps the steps that you can see, are you led? Does the field become bigger? You can see even more of what's ahead of you. So allow yourself, give yourself permission to live your truth, embody your truth to the fullest degree possible, right? Because it's only one you. Nobody can tell you that you're getting it wrong, right? Because there's literally only one you, and nobody else can validate you. So you can't get it wrong. You cannot get you wrong. You're the only one living life from your own perspective. So give yourself permission to do that, because there's a lot of liberation, there's a lot of freedom in moving from that perspective. Yeah.
What a beautiful testament. Yes.
Yeah.
And how can people best get in touch with you to hear more about your offerings and what it is that you could share with them?
So I am on Linktree. You can get to me, Linktree/Andena Sananda Kumara, and that's Andona spelled Andena, Sananda Kumara. That's a whole story in itself. The name, but that's how you can get in contact with me now. I'm building a website, constructing a website. It's in progress. It'll be a great gift to the collective once it's complete, because it won't just be a website. It will be a resource center for all that's coming through me, the entire body of work that's coming through me. So right now it's on Linktree/Andona Sananda Kumara.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you so much, Andona. And it's been just an extraordinary experience like no other. And I thank everyone for tuning in this whole time and receiving what it is that we've been desiring to share for a time. And I hope that you found this voyage with us just as extraordinary as it has been for the two of us. And we honor you. We leave you with much love. And thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. Namaste.
Tututi se petrin, kaira batu suere matres pura, tacierenti, kutu. Piriku tutte risparglia la gente, su cui amatosia, tempacutro spiratu, ocura. Kutira masunda le iere siria.
This has been a presentation of New Earth One Network, your home for New Earth living. Access information, education, and videos on living from the heart in unity consciousness. Visit newearth1.com.